self-storage in particular, like, is it one of these asset classes that's like we're scratching the surface, or is it pretty well saturated at this point?
It's definitely not saturated nationally. Self-storage continues to keep evolving. You're getting people electronic doors. You're getting basically like smart bots that are handling people. They're basically having different types of call centers. I mean, there is so many different things that you can do that are still evolving the process. And as a result, because it's not mature asset classes, the returns are absolutely ridiculous. I'm building facilities under $50 a square foot, and then we're trading anywhere from 80 to 90 a square foot. My daughter could explain that to you guys. Like, my daddy can build 50,000 square feet at $50 a square foot, and he can turn around and sell it at a $40,000 delta. That's $2 million, So it's not hard to sell that to investors. It's a super easy elevator pitch.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jamie Gruber, along with my co-host, Grant Warrington. How's it going, buddy?
Going great. I'm excited to hear this one. I got a lot of questions about self-storage, so I'm excited to dig into this.
Yeah, me too. It's funny. We've had a Michigan run. We had Aaron Caterberg, and now we got Charlie on. So we had a Michigan run recently. So
Aaron was actually just at my site. Actually, we did like a quick video about the irrigation on site at one of our facilities.
Yeah, and he's got an interesting self-storage deal in a prison. So. Yeah, we'll talk self-storage, no doubt about it. About it. Our guest today, Charlie Kao, is an investor, entrepreneur, GoBundance member, father, a husband out of Western Michigan, and he is all about self-storage. So we're going to dive into that today and get some really great nuggets from him. Charlie, man, welcome. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Let's start with a little backstory. So I mentioned Western Michigan, but kind of give us the beginnings. Where you're from? Is that where you're from originally, and kind of your story in 5 or so minutes?
Yeah. So my dad was an immigrant. He moved here when he was 39, and then kind of long story short, but he could not find many jobs because he couldn't speak English when he moved to the United States. And so he found a job for one of the few women that could speak Chinese that owned a large commercial real estate portfolio up in the Tri-City area, so Midland, Bay City, Saginaw area. And essentially what happened is he got a job as a handyman. And then what happened was one of the chefs basically no-showed. And he was like, "Hey, I can cook." And she was like, well, I guess I got no options. I got to let you cook. And he actually did a really good job. And so she was like, "Okay, well, I got to figure out what I'm going to do because you're my best handyman." And he was like, "Well, I'll do both." So he basically did both for almost a decade, just grinding out 80, 90-hour weeks. Like, it was absolutely insane, so I really don't know how he did it, to be honest. But essentially, from that point forward, I switched over to be his free, sewage pickup, cleanup, like child labor, guy that works for free. So every child labor law you can think of, from a flat roofing a roof when I was 12, getting tied to a tree with a chainsaw. I broke every OSHA law possible you can think of. So that was kind of my start in real estate. I lived in Michigan pretty much the most of my life, but I did live outside for a decade, where I lived everywhere from England to Chicago to California before kind of moving back. So.
Wow. How did your father, so he's coming from, it sounds like China. Is that where your dad's from?
From Taiwan.
Taiwan. How did he find Midland, Michigan, of all places?
So my aunt was a really well-known doctor, actually, in the Midwest. She was a pediatrician with a specialization where she could issue controlled substances, which I guess there's not many of those in the United States. So we got actually sponsored very easily because she's a doctor. And so she was based out of Midland, Michigan. So that's why we ended up here of all places.
Got it. Yep, that makes perfect sense. Okay, cool. You mentioned your beginnings in real estate started then. What were your beginnings in real estate? Where did you start? How did you start? Kind of give us that story.
Yeah, I was basically just grinding, lifting toilets. I was basically doing any maintenance. My dad was a heavy owner operator, and nothing got contracted out. And at the time, I don't remember what the manual was, but we didn't have YouTube back then. So it was basically studying manuals, doing whatever you can before we basically hire it out. So, I basically was so sick of real estate that by the time I got into high school, I was like, there's no way I'm doing anything in real estate. Real estate sucks. So of course, obviously that changed. I was working a lot of W-2 jobs, making significant money for others. And at one point I was, I did $85 million in sales for my territory, like 80 to 85 million. Wow. And I was getting paid like 0.001% of that. And so I realized that, if I worked this hard in real estate, I probably could do a lot better. And then also I kept running to a lot of clients that were, investing in real estate. And like, I was hearing how they were making it more passive. I can do this. I don't have to do it the way my dad did it. So that's kind of how I transitioned over.
Interesting. What did you do? What were the W-2 jobs, sales? What was that? And how long did you do it for?
Yeah, so my master's in exercise physiology. So I was a Division I strength coach at 2 Division I universities. Wow. That was kind of my first job. That paid absolutely horrible, but I enjoyed it. It's insane because you spend so much time around athletes doing that. You think that you'd be in good shape yourself, but it's actually the exact opposite. Like my coach, we used to joke around. He had an IV of Monster Red Bull running out of his arm because he goes through like a case a day. So. So I did that. And then I also was working in finance and banking. So I had a commercial lending background. So that helped out quite a bit. And then I worked in med tech sales for about 5 years.
So all told, before you pivoted to real estate as a full-time venture, was that about a decade of time? Am I counting that right? Or
so I actually tried to quit my job, my W-2 job, and got into real estate. And then what happened was I got sick to the point where I was making like $40,000 a year passive, and the thought process behind it would have been that, I'm not going to not do anything. But then when I got sick, I was purging medical bills and I wasn't able to work. So, so the worst case scenario kind of happened to me. So I went back to a W-2. I stayed in that W-2 job way longer than I had to, obviously, because of circumstances that had before. Sure. So, if my whole family got in a car accident and I had to take care of all 4 of them or something like that, I had to completely separate myself from the business and still purge, $250,000 a year of medical bills. We would still be able to survive that, which is like a scenario most people couldn't. But that's pretty much the scenario I wanted to be able to survive before I quit, because I had that terrible experience before. That was pretty life altering. So
what happened? You said you got sick. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I had I went to the dentist, and they basically were, because what happened is people were telling me, "Hey, dude, your breath smells," and I'm like, I don't know why, I'm doing everything. So it was basically found out that I had cancer cells that were basically essentially decomposing my gums, and so the reason why my mouth smelled so bad is because it was basically eating them. So. Wow. So there's a good chance down the road I'm going to get dentures earlier than most people, but it was not considered terminal, but at the same time, insurance didn't cover a lot of it, which I was really surprised.
Why? Why didn't they cover a lot of it?
Well, I was self-employed, and then they just kept. I look back on it, there's so many different things I could do, but they basically kept throwing these loopholes that made it very, very hard to get paid out, that I essentially just kind of gave up. So. So I walked away with 6 figures of medical debt, which, I know that's not a lot to some people, but at the time when I was only making like 40,000 and then also wasn't able to work, that was basically like, $150,000, $160,000 swing.
So having a second home with a $40,000 salary, essentially.
Yeah, it's funny now because, my dad actually just moved with me about a month and a half ago. So we're kind of back in that scenario again. I have a caregiver for him and a lot of resources dedicated to take care of him. So, in the end, I think it all worked out. But I definitely worked a lot of 80, 90-hour weeks for a few years where, like in my medical sales job, I took my daughter to school to ride with me in the field for, bring your kid to work day one time. Mm-hmm. And her book report or her report on the trip was like, my dad drives a lot. He brings food to people. Their doctor when they're hungry, and he talks a lot. And I'm like, that's not exactly what I do, but I can see why you say that. But, more like, hey, he's an expert in the field of, but that's how she described what I do, because pretty much I drove 70,000 miles a year. But kind of what I did was, the night before I'd plan out 15, 20 phone calls. And then while I was basically driving, I was either like listening to podcasts like this, 1.5 speed, 40 hours of podcast, getting the education that way while also doing sales calls nonstop. If I drove by a storage facility, if I drove by an apartment complex, I'm like, well, shoot, I got 8 hours of driving. Let's just go ahead and call them and see if they'll sell. So I was basically banging out sales calls for real estate while I was banging out sales calls for med tech sales. And I was kind of basically doing 2 jobs. So, even though like I was working 40 hours for one job, I made sure that all that drive time, that 25 hours of drive time, I was utilizing that for real estate.
Wow, man.
You said, I got a question about England though. That caught me. You said you've lived all over. What were you doing in England?
Yeah, so I basically did a work study in England. I got through my master's program so fast that they basically said, hey, there's this class that you have to take. Unfortunately, that's not offered until the spring of next year. And so I was basically like, oh, what am I going to do then? Because I need to graduate. And so they're like, well, we can offer you like this work study program. So I was like, I basically just took it as a semester off. The work study program I did, I think I worked for about 6 hours in a lab, and then I took like music class and like a bunch of other stuff. And I was absolutely horrible about music. I was doing the Bart Simpson like garbage can like Happy Birthday Lisa thing. If you guys are old enough to remember that, but I basically took just basically like fluff classes to waiting around to take that last class I needed to graduate.
Nice, interesting. All right, so I didn't know about. I don't think I knew about the illness. That's incredible. I'm glad. Obviously, you're over that, and I'm sorry to hear about your dad. I hope everything is as comfortable as can be in that regard. Talk about real estate, self-storage. So that's kind of where you are now, right? So self-storage is what you're diving deep on, and you're being sought out to speak for different events around. Like you become a big time self-storage guy. Where did that start? How did you get into self-storage? Was that like your first thing in real estate, or did you evolve to that? Kind of give us that journey.
Yeah. So, if you look on paper, when I really started on paper, I probably started like in 2007, but like, I consider I was enslaved into real estate by my dad. That's to be honest. No, there wasn't an option. I was forced to do it. But on paper, like with documentation, but before that, I actually had a chance to be in self-storage with my father because he owned an apartment complex from a self-storage facility. And that self-storage facility owner reached out to my dad's accountant and said, hey, do you want to buy this across the street? Which that paired very well. So that was kind of my first exposure to that. When we sold that, we were like, oh, this is like the top of the market. It's never going to get, better. And then, of course, what we had happen is we brought technology. We brought a lot of different things. We bought call centers. We brought like electronic gating, electronic payment systems, web-based software, and that really revolutionized the industry and really just changed things significantly. So I got back into that, but to be honest, it almost felt like a new industry. So I had to take a step back because I was primarily in multifamily, even though I have other asset classes. But one of the reasons why I got into self-storage too as well was because I do a pretty large amount on the brokerage side, and what happened was I was marketing to like 4 to 10 unit multifamily owners. And then what happened is that I outgrew that. So then my clients or friends were like, hey, if you find a deal that you like, can you pass it off to me? And so at first I was like, well, shoot, let's just make back my marketing. So I was charging like $5,000 or $10,000, not making a lot, but eventually I started making more of that. But then as we know, the market had a huge run up, over the last 5 years. Those clients came back to me like, hey, Charles, I know you just sold me like a 10 unit for $1 million. I need a 1031 into another property. And I was like, well, I was looking at this $2.5 million property for myself, but I just made a $60,000 commission off you. And I can make another $100,000 commission off you. And I don't want to lose you as a client. So then I was like, you know what, this might make sense. I don't want to compete against my clients. So I'm going to reserve multifamily for my clients. I basically have done a heavy amount of brokerage in that. And then I switched over to self-storage side, and I try to really not take on any clients on the brokerage side for self-storage. And so it worked out because, I took a step back to go forward, but it really allowed me to just focus on self-storage for a couple of years and not focus on, multiple asset classes and get distracted. Because I think that's my biggest problem was I was doing well in multifamily. So to do that well and then try to do another thing well on top of it made it kind of difficult.
What's your buy criteria, and is it evolved on self storage? Like, what were you looking at versus what maybe you are looking at, or has it been kind of the same since you've gotten into it?
Yeah, so I still invest in multiple asset classes, and uniformly across all my asset classes, my criteria is very strict as far as economic indicators. So I have to be in an area that if I look in the past 10 years, and at any point there was a decline in population, I flat out won't invest. So it's got to have, I'm looking for job growth, I'm looking for job diversity, and I'm looking for population growth. In general, I'm looking for areas that are above the average median household income. So I'm really upgrading the type of asset class. So if you were classified, we're looking at now, I'm really looking at asset preservation more than asset growth, because, I got a big enough portfolio now that it's getting difficult enough to manage that we're actually modifying our model. So before we were taking models where we were building, taking it all the way to close. And you might have seen this, I put 2 self-storage for sale. Now we're actually just focusing on a build to flip model. So basically we're building and then getting certificate occupancy, selling it. And then a lot of times we're getting the occupancy super high while it's under contract, just because we're leasing up in case, the buyer backs out. So that's kind of how we changed our model in that sense.
Are those criteria within certain markets only? Like, is it the state of Michigan or the Midwest, or is it anywhere? Do you buy anywhere if it meets those criteria? All of that.
I'm incredibly strict on that criteria, because we all have seen this. We've seen operators that basically got bailed out by the market run up. And the reason why they got bailed out is because of strong economic indicators. So the biggest thing is that I never want to be in a market where population is declining, and then I have to try to guess what that's going to do to the pricing when the supply demand curve falls off, right? Whereas if I'm in an area like, we'll use Grand Rapids, Michigan. Grand Rapids, Michigan needs 9,000 housing units by 2025. They're not going to get it with interest rates and building materials they have. If anything, it's been halted. Yeah. So you see that 9,000 housing units. So I can at least bank that I'm going to get at least the price I have today. I might not get the price. I can't pro forma out for pricing in the future, but I have a great equalizer here that if I buy wrong, if I mess up or anything, well, it's very easy to basically cover that mistake up if I have really strong economic background and everything else, right? Yeah. So that's why I like to go that route, even if it means taking a much smaller single-digit return in the first 1 to 2 years, because I'm really focused on quality and basically asset preservation at this point. I know another $1 million is not going to do more for my net worth at this point in time. So that's really kind of what my focus is now in Michigan. Because I understand this market so well, I use self-storage as an example. Prison populations, those aren't included in the census data. Those people are not getting storage. So, if I know an area like Ionia, Michigan, one of the largest prisons in the state, I can basically account for that. If I do self-storage in East Lansing, Michigan, the undergraduate student population is not included in the census data yet. You got, 40,000, kids in one of the top 15 largest universities in the country. So now I can add that back in. So, or let's say I'm in an area like, let's say Traverse City, Michigan. We all know Traverse City, Michigan, the population in that area around all those lakes, like 10X's in the summer, so I might have a deal that doesn't look good on paper. But then when I look at it, I'm like, well, shoot, you have a lot of wealthy people that have second homes. They got boats, RVs, all these toys, and they're using a lot of storage. So I can be above the, guru recommendation in those areas. So in areas I know that well, I definitely will. But most of what I have out of state would be like, I know you guys had a deal, I think it's in Georgia that you guys did. I'm not investing in that deal to be an operator. Most of the time, if I'm a GP, I'm close to silent, just enough to meet the requirements, because somebody has expertise in the area. That's what I'm paying for. I'm paying for their expertise because that has value to it. Whereas in Michigan, everything I have, I'm generally the operator for. It's my backyard. Nobody knows it better than me. I'm not going to trust that to somebody else to operate it unless it's one of my partners that has more experience or it's a new asset class. So that's kind of my philosophy there. I'm investing in people and I'm investing in the quality of the asset. And also from a banking perspective, we were always taught this when I was lending, that if this person forecloses, yes, they say they can run it this way, but can the bank run it that way, or can the bank hire somebody else to run it that way? So we were always looking at, if this comes back to us, what we'll be doing. So that was one of the benefits of working in finance. Is I look at from banking perspective, what the bank wants is also now what I also want as well.
Got it. Multifamily felt like it got, and maybe still to this day, saturated. Right. There's a lot of people in the game. There's a lot of sort of influencers with masterminds and all that stuff. Maybe it's because we're in the world and we're zoned in. I don't know, but self-storage feels like that next thing. Feels like it. I don't know if it is or not. Is it saturated right now? Like I love what you talked about in the markets that you look, the markets that you buy in, how you look at the criteria that you have and everything else. But you made a decision, obviously, like, okay, multifamily, I'm competing with my clients. I'm going to go somewhere else. So there's industrial, there's hotel, there's a whole lot of different, and you maybe touched a lot of it because you mentioned you have kind of a diverse portfolio, but self-storage in particular, like, is it, I don't know, is it one of these asset classes that's like we're scratching the surface, or is it pretty well saturated at this point?
It's definitely not saturated nationally, even though it definitely is saturated in certain markets. So I use Austin, Texas, for example. Austin, Texas right now is oversaturated by, I think, like 1.5 square foot per capita. So the numbers that we're always using for feasibility study is we are using basically a square foot per capita. So if there's 100,000 people in a city and the supply demand recommendations from the storage almanac say you can absorb, we'll just use it around a nice even number, 8 square foot per capita. That means that it could be a total of 800,000 square feet versus in that radius. So now, but Austin, as we know, is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. So like when we do feasibility studies, we do them both in-house and for others. If I see a market that's growing like 10%, which that market is growing in some areas is growing 20% year over year. I actually will use the 2025 population to basically account for that. So there's some nuances there. The biggest thing I would say is that you mentioned multifamily, the returns have really gone down. There's a lot of billionaires in real estate. And the part of the reason why is because it's a strong safe haven because it's such a mature asset class. People keep trying to bring new technologies to multifamily, but there's really not much more that you can really bring to it, at this point in time. You really can't reinvent the wheel. I know people try to over and over again, but I mean, they really don't take off. You got great property management software, and there's really just evolving that. Self-storage continues to keep evolving. You're getting people electronic doors. You're getting basically like smart bots that are handling people. You're basically having different types of call centers. I mean, there is so many different things that you can do that are still evolving the process. And as a result, because it's not a mature asset classes, the returns are absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I'm building a facility right now that, and one of the reasons why I want to switch to a build to flip model is because I'm building facilities under $50 a square foot, and then we're trading anywhere from 80 to 90 a square foot. So going back to my example, my kid, my daughter could explain that to you guys. Like my daddy can build 50,000 square feet at $50 a square foot, and he can turn around and sell it at a $40,000 delta. That's $2 million, So it's not hard to sell that to investors. It's a super easy elevator pitch, and there's few moving parts. But you just have to have really, really strong mastery. It makes it more important to get each one of those moving parts correct because there's fewer, but it just makes things easier. And so from our standpoint, like we had a BPO on a facility where it came back like, $10 or $12 a square foot higher to stabilize it. Then I was like, well, if I want to put those time and resources, but then I also got interest carry because I got, an interest on the loan. I got that. Well, that's like $4 to $6 a square foot right there. Does it really make sense for us to do that? And a lot of these national companies, they can stabilize them so fast that, they'll get, and the fact that they get $6 a square foot of equity, they're willing to pay that. And so for me, I don't do a lot of deals. I'm not doing 15, 20 deals a year. Normally I'm only doing 2 to 3 years in consulting on a lot more, but I was with the private equity group and, I can't disclose the percentage, but I had a single digit percentage of the equity group and we're doing $130 million a deal. That's great. But then I can do $20 million and get 20 to 50%. And so which one is worth more to me? So how I'm basically transitioning that, a lot of that was because of my dad moving in and I had to step away from the business was I created a list. And I put down the list of like, how much am I making per hour doing all these things? And and how much can I pay somebody to do it, and also kind of what do I think it's worth. And when it came down to the asset managing these complexes, it was still lucrative. It would be more than lucrative for most people. But when I just looked at the building aspect of it, if I could go from 2 to 3 builds to 4 to 5 builds, and not taking out the management piece, it just made so much more sense to do that. Because the return on time for me then was, getting, closer to $10,000 an hour at that point in time.
One of the things with you mentioned about like 9,000 housing units in Grand Rapids, or in the multifamily space, especially workforce level housing, B class, C class, right? Is the lack of the lack of development, or the slowness of development, right? That's kind of what's likely not to. It is my opinion. You look at this stuff way more than me, so challenge it, please. But that's where I see we're going to cool off in the housing market, but long term there's still a demand supply imbalance that we haven't had. I don't think in any other recession in the last 50 years or 80 years or ever for that matter. So that stuff is still there. Development is slow. Development is expensive. So there's a supply demand imbalance that maybe keeps some fundamentals in place. Cooling, but not complete drop off. Yeah. But it sounds like in self-storage, is the risk that like what I'm hearing is, so anybody can pop up these self-storage facilities for $50 a square foot or whatever. So very quickly any market that's maybe not saturated now could become very saturated if somebody wanted to build. This isn't like hey, there's a shortage of these, trading them is the only way to go, and then improving the operation of the property. Like you can build them pretty quickly. Is that a risk to that industry?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest risk to the industry is kind of like you said. Like if you have a builder that has built multifamily that decides they want to pivot into self-storage, they can easily overbuild the market, because I mean it's fewer moving parts. There's more land for it. There's fewer obstacles, and unlike most other asset classes, like multifamily, when you build multifamily, in Michigan especially, most of the time you're underwater. The only reason why these multi can get built is with grants, like as not in Florida, or some other markets that might be a little bit different, where they're, multis trading for 250, 350, 450 square feet. Whereas in, Michigan, we have a lot of areas that are trading. With some areas we have them trading in, double digits, but most of the time multi is trading under $200 a square foot, which, is not much delta. Whereas, now for me, I build so much cheaper because I am doing the building construction management. So I can build them cheaper than anybody else. That, and also we only build large facilities, so I bring them down in scale, because, I looked at a facility where if I can do 22,000 square feet, but after I do 20,000 square feet, my cost to build might be like $60 a square foot. So why not do 45, 50,000 square feet at $50 a square foot, where I keep bringing all that space down? Because even if that extra 10 or 20% there sits empty, it's still at the exact same cost it would have been taking me to build, essentially. Because, my excavator, I brought this up in my videos, but my excavators are saying, like, honestly, that's too small of a job for me because it costs me $15,000 to $25,000 to drop my equipment. So, if I'm taking $15,000 equipment drop and I'm spreading over 15,000 square feet, that's $1 a square foot. If I'm doing 100,000 square foot build, well, now, okay, I'm looking at cents on the dollar too as well. So there's a lot of things that go into that, with the mastery that goes into that. That's kind of like, so I can build it probably $20 a square foot than the builders in the area, especially because they're paying themselves and whatnot. How I pay myself basically is I pay myself with more equity instead. So that is a valid concern there too as well. I'm starting to see a lot of more throughout the country though, is that people are getting more strict with building self-storage. So there's a lot of areas in Texas where you have to have retail, or you have to have a masonry fence around it, or you can't see the storage. And so that really sucks, because now that just jacks your costs up, but it also makes sites a lot less feasible. So the areas that have very, very little restrictions, that is a worry for me. So that's one of the things that we consider. So like I might be in a market where, we looked at a site in a market where it could absorb self-storage, but I just looked at how much cheap industrial land there was around it. And ultimately, we declined the site because I was just worried about, like, somebody could easily build 400,000 square feet around us, and so for this site, it just didn't make sense. I like high barriers. So you look at the best self-storage facilities in the country, one of them is San Francisco, California. I mean, guess what? They're not approving more self-storage in San Francisco, California. They want more multi. So the facilities there are still going to be there when the population increases 20, 30, 40%. So like in markets like that, I would actually even overpay to be in a market like that because I know that I have no ability for competition to built. So those are things that we have very strict criteria, which is another reason why. I mean, I have deals that, I have a deal I sold to a client that, he's making a lot of money on it. He's gonna, and I passed on it because my criteria was too small. And afterwards he was like, yeah, thanks. He's gonna make 7 figures on this deal probably in about 24 months.
Wow.
So because I'm really strict on criteria. I don't want to lose money. Like I rather make 4% or 6%, which is also why I invest passively with a lot of those funds too as well. So
something you mentioned, Grant. I know you got a question, but just something you mentioned is about like San Francisco, because I think the popular buzz phrase is, why would you invest in California, or why would you invest in New York? And that's really talking about where there's people involved, tenants, right? But to your point, I'm sure there's some laws that are not advantageous even to the self-storage investor. I'm sure, but it's not like, hey, don't worry about paying rent for the next 2 years, person. We got your back, and landlord, just deal with it. So it kind of re-exposes markets that maybe people swore off of as actually being some of the best markets to invest in terms of self-storage. So I just thought it was an interesting point. So great.
Yeah, and also you don't have rent control in California on self-storage, so you can do whatever you want. You don't have the crazy tenant laws, so it's not like landlord friendly state or that. So it's just a completely different asset class. But I personally like areas with very high barriers, because then it knows that, okay, this guy that's just trying to build a self-storage for the first time, he's not going to be able to get through all those restrictions. Every site that we do has a very advanced drainage plan. Whereas you go to some areas, you can literally just draw on a pencil, pencil paper, and say, hey, this is roughly what I'm going to do. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. We went to high school together. Yeah, sure. Go ahead and build it. So we like the high barriers. And so we'd like to be in the markets of high barriers. And so going back, I'm bullish on self-storage, just like I am in any other asset classes in strong markets. I'm not bullish in self-storage as a class in total, which that might surprise people because, I do a lot of speaking for self-storage, but I'm all about areas that make sense, not just self-storage makes sense. So
Charlie, who's your demographic? Who do you see the most of? Is it like baby boomers, like Gen Z? They move around a lot. You know what I mean? And then also the demand, do the different demographics have different demand? Like is outdoor or indoor climate controlled? And what do you like to focus on yourself?
Yeah, so that's an awesome question. You're actually the first person that's asked me that I can think of, actually. So there are things you can do in self-storage that on paper look better. We know this. I could buy a property that has majority Section 8 tenants, and on paper that looks better. But then sometimes you deal with what you can have when you deal with lower quality tenants. Yeah. That's the same thing with self-storage. So a 5x10. Pretty much nationwide rents for, over $1.10 a square foot. Whereas when you get into a 10x30, I might only get 60 to 65 cents a square foot. So if I'm building out pro forma and I'm doing 52,000 square foot, if I just want to make it look super sweet, I'm just going, we're doing all 5x5s, all 10x10s. But in reality, with the management of that is that 5x10 don't stay as much. They tend to stay less than a year. They do lease up faster, but then also too as well, they're also more likely to get auctioned because this stat is very old, but I still recall it to this day. But I was at a convention a while back that said the average person stores 9 months of inventory. So basically what that means is that if I have a $50 unit, I'm storing probably $450 of product in that. So if they've stayed there basically 9 months and they got closed, of course they're more likely to go to auction. Now, if I have a 10x30, somebody's storing a Corvette or a piano or something like that, our 10x30s, they rarely ever go to auction. And they do, a lot of times we actually make money on it, which in Michigan, you can't make money on the auction. You actually have to pay it back to that person, which is a huge pay on its own. So for me, I always hope we get as close to as much as they owe as possible without going over. But to be honest, as long as I can get somebody to clean out the unit for free, I'm okay with that. So that goes. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish. Go ahead.
So demographic wise, the reason why we like to go after higher end tenants, because let's use boat RV. If I've just paid $100,000 for a boat RV and I'm paying $70, $90 a month to store it outside, or I'm paying in tithe, I'm going to pay that. Like, there's no way I'm not going to, because what I'm storing is so valuable, it's not working for close on it. Even if, let's say, the economy collapsed, we have basically the lien holder on record. So then I basically go after abandoned title, and then basically I try and take it, and the lien holder will pay us because they're not going to lose a whole RV to us. So I'm actually even more protected in that sense. So that's why we like to go after those. So like, I have concierge suites, they're high ceiling with an electrical outlet. So I'm going after that person that can pay for luxury. And I know times people will say that, paying for luxury has a cost because if the economy tanks. Honestly, a lot of these clients, the economy will not affect them. I to be honest, because of what happened to my health scare, I think there was always a worry for up until maybe even like 3 years ago that I could die completely poor and penniless. Because to be honest, there's times that I probably dramatized the situation more. Was thinking I'm going to die, poor. When I really realized that, like, now, if my family is suffering and we're the top, like 99.5%, what is happening to the 99.5% beneath us? There's no way that that's going to hit us that hard, because if it does, I would be more worried about like a government collapse than I'd be more worried about it hurting us in that sense.
So I got a question. If someone doesn't pay you, we were talking about that. How long does it take to take possession of that storage? And then you said whatever's in there, you have to sell and reimburse them?
I should know this off the top of my head, but I believe it's 48 days. I can get them out super, super fast.
Oh, wow.
We don't do it in 48 days because normally what happens is that we are getting where their auction stuff is getting auctioned on day 68 when they owe roughly 3 months rent. Because we all have these stories where like last year in multi-late fees, all my vacations were paid for by late fee from tenants. So the late fee income is solid. So I personally think that's kind of the best bread and butter. But if I really wanted to do it like right away, I could do it basically as little as 48 days. So the reason I don't know that is because once we set it in the system, our system automatically sends those alerts to them. And so we actually are like 5 days is a big one in Michigan. You can do 20% or $20. And so that one we fall to the T. And then everything else they get, what happens with the tenants is every time they get an alert, something happens. So day 5, they get a lockout late fee. They normally pay within 24 hours. Day 12, they basically can get they can actually get like physically like locked out. And then we can also notify them of an auction procedure. 24 hours, we get paid with that. So everything we do, like if we say we're going to lock them out on day 12, most of the time we actually don't lock them out until day 14 to 15, because a lot of times what used to happen is that we'd run out there and lock them out, and then they pay immediately because they got the alert. Because they don't do anything until they're reminded. And then they get another auction like, hey, we're actually posting your stuff for auction. They pay within 24 hours. So we push everything out a little bit past that, simply because a lot of times they do pay. And then if they're, by the time they get to day 68, they're 3 months behind and with 3 late fees. And then at that point we auction. And when we auction, most of my time, my goal is just to get like 1 month rent back and then have them clean out the fee. So what they do is you buy an auction through us. I think we pay 10 or 20% to the auction site. They pay that deposit to the auction site. We collect the rest from that person. And then we also collect a cleaning deposit as well. So they have to completely clean out the unit, broom swept, to basically to get their deposit back. And if they don't, then I just keep the deposit and I'll just use somebody else. I'll use that deposit to pay somebody else to do it. But so like, because a lot of times you get these units, especially these 5x10s, where it's like, it's clothes. Like they might have had a lot of worth to the person, but to the average person, somebody else's used clothes is worth like 10 cents a shirt.
Yeah.
So when that happens, I'm just trying to get somebody to clean it out for me for free, really, at that point in time. So I don't have to pay somebody to come out and clean it.
How much is a cleaning deposit?
It ranges from anywhere from $50 to $150, depending on the size of the unit.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. I was going to say, is it like a massive amount where people are like, oh, I'll clean that thing, or is it more like, you know what, some will clean it to get it back, and some people will be like, yeah, you just deal with it, keep my 150.
Yeah, I mean, at a worst case scenario, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll clean out a good portion of stuff, and then they'll just give it back and you keep the deposit. And it's like, well, $100, I can pay somebody with, a trailer to come out and just grab it. Or what we do is we consolidate, all the units into one. And then when that happens, we'll just get a dumpster and put it all in. But my goal is basically just to have, because we're all used to like a multi, like paying for, nobody's coming here to clean somebody else's place out. So that's a unique thing in storage. Like somebody actually paid for somebody else's stuff, and now a lot of times you'll also see too, as well as that person comes in, they're like, man, I can't get someone to get this piano. I got all this stuff. And so they'll turn around and just rent it for us, and they become the renter with that person's stuff. And then they'll just slowly sell stuff out too. But that happens quite a bit too as well. And then, and obviously you see those shows where, people are actually doing that for a business. Yeah. I would say maybe about a quarter of the people that do our auctions are actually doing that type of business as well, because it can be fairly lucrative, but I've also seen some people get burned pretty bad as well, because we have a quick disclosure that we make no representation. So you guys have ever seen the shows?
Yeah. Storage Wars or whatever it is. Yeah.
One of my property managers at a time, one time made a mistake that said we got a TV, blah, 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 all this stuff like that. And then it turned out it was just a TV box. TV. So we actually had to basically pay that guy. We basically gave that guy all his money back. And I know he took some stuff out of it because you said there was a TV and I was expecting a TV, and we got shook down, but it was our mistake. And then actually what I just did is we actually just turned around and re-auctioned it, took off the box thing, and then somebody else cleaned out for free for us. So that can easily happen pretty easily as well.
Dude, all I can tell you is this is the most in-depth on every freaking level I've ever heard anybody go into self-storage. And dude, like there's the names out there. There's the GoBundance guys, AJ, and all these. I mean, so many guys into self-storage. You're like into the belly of self-storage.
Yeah, I mean that's why, like, when I consult, I mean, I do, like, people are just like, what the heck, everything. But that's also why, like, I had to switch my model up, because it's like, for me, I've always been learning. Even though I've outsourced a lot of tasks, I've always had to learn the task first, because I want to make sure it's taught properly to my staff. So I had to let go of that and then be like, listen, let somebody else learn it and teach my staff. I don't have to be the one to learn everything. So I know too much that I shouldn't have to know it. But I'm actually kind of happy that you asked me that question about how fast I can get out. I didn't know it, because it means that I'm not spending my time remembering things that are so little to the business.
Makes sense.
What about employees? Do you have a lot of employees? I'm in multifamily, right? So I always try to say, well, you're just trading, tenants for employees and managing employees. Am I wrong?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing is that if your facility size is too small, it makes it very difficult to staff. And so there was a transition in the industry where everybody was going unmanned, like, because all this technology. But then as you're getting markets more competitive now, people do have a value for customer service, especially when we know that if somebody gets great customer service on their first self-storage call, they will a lot of times actually book that place. But if they call it a third-party call center that's based overseas, person doesn't speak English, is not answering their questions well, then they're not going to book there. So now you're starting to see a lot of people switch back to a manned model, because you need to have that. We have both. Like, I have a facility where I pay. It's actually the owner that we bought it from, and I that's a whole nother conversation. But basically, I was like, listen, I'm concerned about, we buy this facility from you, we're going to turn you into a multimillionaire overnight. Are you fine working for a salary under six figures? Because, my main thing is I want you to feel respected, that, we value your time. I can't pay you what a millionaire's time is worth to manage this facility. So when we can do full-time management, then we do, because obviously it's a huge upsell. Lease ups are astronomically faster. Customer service is better. We get more 5-star reviews, SEO, everything's better. But there's also a significant cost, paying anywhere from, $40 to, $90,000 a year, depending on the size of the facility with that. So.
Got it.
Interesting. So
when we don't have when we have an unmanned facility, we typically have a person that's doing 2 to 3 site visits a month, where we're just expensing it at like, a $60 to $70 site visit fee to do lockouts, to do all those kind of things.
Yeah, makes sense. I was going to apologize. I was looking away. Like in the Dominican, the bugs are bigger than Grant's inflated head, and I thought I saw one crawling along the floor here. I was starting to like be cool.
Jealous.
Be cool. Don't freak out on camera. But no, it's not. I don't think it is anyway. I hope that's not. But
I hope you freak out on camera.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Wouldn't it? It actually kind of would be funny. But anyway, Charlie, so let's talk about GoBundance for a minute here. You've been a member for a bit, at least over a year, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's about a year.
Yeah, a little over a year. Back when GoBundance had fewer members, I knew it felt like 10 or 15% of the members. So I was like, do I want to join this group? I know a lot of the guys anyways, but
sure.
My biggest mistake is not joining sooner, because I found a lot of value with it. Even with the guys that I do know already, in that sense too. So
what's kind of what's your biggest, like when you say, hey, I get a lot of value from GoBundance, what's some of the things that you get the most value out of?
So this might be a surprise to a lot of people, because you're in a millionaire's mastermind essentially, but seeing guys like, Jamie and Grant, and you guys, like, and just being content, like, if you put me in a group with somebody that's doing really, really well, I don't want to say I would go borderline, like, be a dick, but I get competitive. I'm like, shoot, I want to do that. He just did 120 million deal. I want to do that. I want to do that. And then it just got to the point where I'm like, especially in GoBundance, you're never going to be that top guy. I know some of the guys are top guys and how much they're working, like putting systems in place 90 hours a week. And I'm just like, I gotta be happy with where I'm at. So the biggest thing that's really helped me with this basic work-life balance. I've been working really only about 20 to 25 hours a week for the last, and that was actually one of the reasons why we switched our business model up, is because if I wanted to go to that full scale model or keep it there, I needed to work closer to 40. But, when my dad moved in, and, especially, and I was spending weeks away from it, I realized, like, I need to, really change my lifestyle stuff. So, like, my work schedule, like, today I woke up at 7:20. Well, actually, my wife will make fun. I probably woke up closer to 8. I stayed up late watching Netflix last night. But on average, I wake up at 7:25 in the morning. First hour and a half of the day is getting the kids ready for school, making their lunch. Love it doing that. And then as soon as we drop the kids off at school, it's an hour in the gym. And then after I get out from the gym, get a smoothie, do whatever I can to delay the work day. And then I start my work day around 10:30. Work until 3 o'clock. Then it's all kids doing all their jujitsu, soccer, keeping them out of jail, whatever they are doing. And I work a couple hours in the evening. So I basically built my schedule about what I prioritize the most, which is basically my family and my health first thing in the morning. So
nice. I love
most people do the work schedule, plan the family stuff around it. I'm the exact opposite.
It's funny. I'm similar, and I get up early. I get up 5:30, typically 5:30, and I start with like just whatever I want, either some quiet or I'll do some work. Honestly, first thing, it's just like my mind is just popping, so I go. But then I do all the kids. I make the joke like I'll do all the kids' lunches. I'll get them ready for school. I'll get them dressed. I'll get everything, and then my wife like stumbles out of the room at 7:30 or whatever to take them to school, and somehow gets them there late. It blows my mind. Like I did everything. It's teed up. All you do is jump in the car and go. Now, Grant wakes up around 3. So that's when he starts the day.
Yeah, I heard that. That's nuts.
Yeah. Grant's 3 to 3:15. No, I mean PM. He gets up in the afternoon.
No. I wake up at 6 now, and then I work out in the morning. But I'm very protective of that. You know that, Gruber.
I do. Yeah.
Don't call.
Yeah, well, I still do. I still will. Yeah. But anyway, Charlie, let's wrap this on a question from the GoBundance card game. The question is, and actually, I wonder how you'll answer this. What is your greatest feat of physical endurance?
Physical endurance. I'm trying. That's a tough one. I mean, in recent memory, we just climbed Mount Whitney, which is the tallest peak in the lower 48.
Wow.
And then
that's New Hampshire, right? If I'm not mistaken.
No, it's Southern California.
Oh yeah, the complete opposite side of the country. Never mind.
Yeah, so I do some type of physical event every year, but that or something Mount Rainier, because I mean that one is that's a legit mountain and glacier. I don't really have any super impressive. I've done marathons, things like that, but nothing like crazy out there. So I would say, I think the biggest thing that maybe I've done over the years, especially being health and fitness, is that I've maintained my health. My blood pressure is still low. My blood cholesterol is as good as it was when in my late 20s.
Nice. Mount Washington, I was thinking of. That's the mountain in New Hampshire. I had to Google it quick. Yeah. So I honestly thought maybe you were like, no joke, but overcoming cancer had to be a hell of a physical feat of endurance. I would guess. I thought maybe you were going to go there on that. But
anybody will tell you that if any cancer survivor will tell you it has nothing to do with the physical endurance. That's enough to do with the mental endurance, especially because for me, my ADD is ridiculously horrible. My wife drives my wife nuts. But to have my mind race, not doing anything, sitting in bed or whatever, having massive headaches. It's all mental endurance. The people that survive are people that can endure, which, it's fun thing that you look at. It's like, I mean, shoot, if you can endure cancer, how can you not be a millionaire in real estate? Because I mean, the challenge was significantly harder. And then I didn't even have terminal cancer either as well. It wasn't even a risk for it, but because it got caught fairly early. So
good for you, man. Wow. No, that's incredible. Grant, do you have any wrap up questions before we wrap?
No, that was pretty great, man. I appreciate it.
Charlie, what's the best place for people to reach out or follow or wherever you want to direct folks?
So by my limited social media following, my YouTube channel at Twin Oaks Capital is probably the most popular. So just type in Twin Oaks Capital on YouTube, you'll find it pretty easily. And then after that, I actually have fairly high blockers on social media. So the only one you can access me publicly at is Instagram at Charles C. and then my last name Kao. So Charles C. Kao.
Perfect.
And you do some great videos too, though, on self-storage on your social media, though. I've watched a lot of those.
Yeah, I know. One of the feedbacks I got was that I need to put out more content. And I learned this too as well from one of my social media guru buddies, but I need to do series and I need to give people a coming soon. So I'm starting to do more like 3-part and whatnot. So
look at that.
But I'll be speaking about basically how to bring construction and costs down at ISS in 2023.
Amazing. Good stuff, man. I appreciate you coming on as always. And we'll be in touch as we go along. So I appreciate you being on here.
Thanks, Charlie.
See you.